Hello and welcome to Lesson 3 of Coding with Sahana. This week, we will answer the challenge of the week from our previous lesson, and we will learn about Python's built-in functions. Since built-in functions is a longer topic, we will split it up into Part 1 and Part 2, where Part 2 will be next week's lesson. Next, we will do a practice problem with built-in functions. And finally, I will introduce this week's challenge of the week. Now let's solve last week's challenge of the week. Our assignment was to create a program using 5 variables that correspond to happy, 2, computer science, and 4. And our output should be hello 27 computer science friends, happy to be here for you. And the number of characters in computer science is 15. First, I will create my variables for each word. So H equals happy. Num2 equals 2. Com equals computer. Sci equals science. And num4 equals 4. Now we can say that 27 equals 2 to the power of 4 times 4 minus 8, which is 2 times 4, minus 2, and all of this divided by 2. So as you can see, I created a variable called num27 to represent 27. For our first print statement, we can print hello in quotations, comma, num27, comma, com, comma, sci, comma, and in quotes, friends, period, happy. Now we must convert num2 to a string so we can connect it to be here. Comma. Then we would do something similar where we would convert num4 to a string to connect it to you exclamation mark. For our next print statement, we can simply use a print statement to say, in quotations, the number of characters in comma, com, comma, psi, comma, in quotations, is, comma, and then the length of com plus the length of psi. Keep in mind, we have to add 1 to this number because we have to include the space in between com and psi. Finally, we would convert the sum of our strings into a string so we can concatenate it to a period. If you need a recap as to what concatenate means, please refer to last week's lesson. Now let's run our code. As you can see, we got the desired output. Now let's go into this week's lesson. But before this, let's wrap up our variables lesson. In this image, you can see that I have assigned the number 5 to my variable a, but in the next line, I changed the value of a by adding 2 to its original value of 5. Since 5 plus 2 is 7, when we print a, our output a is 7. However, instead of coding a equals a plus 2, we can shortly write this as a plus equals 2. This means that a is equal to 2 more than its previous value. Similarly, we can use this notation with other operations. This table shows all the different operations using a similar notation. For example, we can say that x is equal to 3 times x's previous value by coding x is equal to star equals 3. Now let's define built-in functions. Python has a set of functions already predefined into the language. These functions have preset functionalities and we will always have access to them. This set of functions is known as Python's built-in functions. Some of them are print, int, float, and string. Let's explore some more. The len function allows us to find the length of strings and lists. In the first line, we found that the length of b space kind exclamation mark is 8 characters. The length function counts all characters, including letters, punctuation marks, and spaces. In the second example, we get an error because we cannot find the length of integers or floats unless converted into a string with quotations around 50.0 in the variable, or if it's put into a string function. In the third function, we can find the length of a list. In this case, our list contains 3 ice cream flavors: vanilla, chocolate, and strawberry. When we find the length of this list, we get 3 because there are only 3 items in our list: vanilla, chocolate, and strawberry. But what is a list? In Python, a list allows us to group together a variety of items into one place, which can even be assigned to a variable name to be referred to throughout the program. In the first case, when we turn a string into a list, it assigns each character as an item of the list. Each letter of the word happy is an item of a list. In the second example, we can convert ranges into lists. But what are ranges? Python has a built-in function that allows you to count using integers. It is called the range function because it will count through a range of numbers. There are three different syntax or forms of using the range function. Let's look at each one. In the first syntax, the range starts counting at 0 and stops one integer less than the number in the range function. In this case, the range is 10, so it prints the numbers from 0 to 9. In the second syntax, the range starts counting at a number and stops one less than the second number. In this example, the range is 1 to 11, so it prints the numbers from 1 to 10. In the third and final syntax, the range starts counting at the first number, stops one less than the second, and counts in steps of the third. In this case, it starts from 0, ends 2 less than 10, and counts by 2. Now, before we get into our next built-in function, let me just point out one thing. The W3 Schools code editor that we have been using is not compatible with Python's input function. Therefore, from now on, we will be using Programmers online code editor. It is almost the same as W3 Schools. Here is the link to Programmers, and I will also put it down in the description. Now let's talk about the input function. Take a look at the example below. In the Programmers code editor, I set the variable age to the input of the question, "What is your age?" and print age. When we run, the computer will give the prompt, "What is your age?" To this, the user types in the response and hits enter. The user's answer will be assigned to the variable age. It is important to note that Python defaults all input responses to a string variable, even if the user enters in a number. If you want to do calculations with the variable age, you might have to convert that variable to an integer or a float. Also, a keynote. The \n after the question enables the user to enter their response on the line after the question line. Now for the practical applications of the input function. Input functions are very important because they allow the user to interact with the computer. As a result, they allow the computer to interact with the information given by the user. User input can be found in many aspects of technology like search bars and Google, YouTube, Netflix, and much more. Now let's do a practice problem with a built-in function. In 2009, Jamaican sprinter Usain Bolt ran the 100-meter dash in a world record of 9.58 seconds. Our assignment is to ask the user for their name and the time it takes for them to run 100 meters. Using this information, it should print an appropriate output statement. Now for our user input, I will create a variable called name. And I will set that equal to the input of "What is your name?" \n. Next, I will make a variable called time that I will set equal to the input of "How long does it take you to run 100 meters?" \n. Finally, I will create a variable called speed, and I will set that equal to 100 divided by time. But since all inputs are strings, I will put a float function around time. Also, since we want all of our decimal values to be rounded to 2 decimal places, I will put the entire statement into a round function, comma 2. This will round speed to 2 decimal places. I can make my final print statement by coding name plus, in quotes, apostrophe s, average speed is, comma, string speed plus meters per second, period. Now when I run my program, I can enter my name, how long it takes me to run 100 meters, and it will output a statement telling me my speed. Now, let me introduce you all to this week's challenge of the week. For this week's challenge of the week, you will create a program that will sum a sequence of numbers determined by the user. To do this, it will ask a user to input the start, stop, and step size of a sequence. It will return a conclusion statement displaying the sequence of data and its sum, as seen in the example below. It will output as follows. My first hint is to create one input statement for start, one for stop, and one for the step. My second hint is to use the list and range functions to create the sequence. Good luck! Thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and click on the bell icon for notifications on my next video.